All right. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you joining us on a Thursday. It's a beautiful day here in Dallas. I hope it is where you are as well. And we're all here to talk about cybersecurity, compliance, and manuals for RIAs. I probably should have put RIA in the title here, but if you're here, you're more than likely an RIA or a consultant or a lawyer. But we're mostly going to focus on the RIA space today. So my name is Brian Hahn. I basically split my career into two, where the first decade I was on the operations side of hedge funds and RIAs as a COO and a CCO and just an operations manager in general. And then the last 15 years, I've been consulting with firms on topics of corporate intelligence and cybersecurity. So I work with a little over 250 financial institutions, SEC-registered financial institutions. And today I just want to walk you through some pro tips for cyber operations and compliance that I've found across the different clients that I serve. Of course, if you find any of this boring, expensive, or technically challenging, I'm certainly here to help and would love to chat with you. But overall, this is going to be the topic for today, and we'll kind of walk through it. I'd like to, before we dive into it, though, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. There's going to be a Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, definitely feel free to hit that little question mark down in the corner and type in your questions. I do this unscripted and just try to flow through this as best I can because what I'm really trying to deliver is a framework, and what we'll find is that it's very different for each and every firm. So that's just to say, if you can ask questions, I answer them anonymously, and I'll kind of give my opinion on there as we go through this. So feel free to use the Q&A. Also, there's going to be a recording of this. If you're registered and on the webinar, you'll receive a link in your email. If not, or if you ever don't register for any in the future but want to catch any of the webinars, definitely check out the YouTube channel, the mTradeCraft YouTube channel. Everything gets updated there. On my homepage, mtradecraft.net, you'll find a link that looks like this to Securing Compliance. This is an intelligence report that I wrote several years ago, and it goes through updated iterations through the years. But you'll hear me reference this throughout the webinar because this is a kind of a key framework, I think, for anyone looking to build an SEC cybersecurity compliance platform. Basically, the document is just, it's an overview of what to expect from the SEC during an examination. What questions are they going to ask? What documents are they going to look to see? And then the second half of the document is literally just a copy and paste from examination notices. So, when I'm building documents for my clients, this is always a reference to me because if you've been through an examination, especially if you've been through more than one, you'll realize the SEC does a lot of copy and paste. And so, you can literally take these and know exactly what's going to show up should you go through an examination. So definitely it's free to download. Jump on the website, you can download that. It's a great reference that you'll hear me go back to. And also there's a new framework I'll be putting out here in a couple weeks, I think, that it may be long overdue, but basically an AI framework. Okay, so in the same way that we're about to walk through things today, there's the technical side. How do we deploy it? How do we build a compliance program around it? This document will do the same thing for AI, whether you're using ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot or any of the Google products. At some point, we are definitely going to have to put a compliance framework together. Everything I kind of came across was just not very well put together, so I started referencing SANS and then NIST to put one together that was, I think, very specific for RIAs. So you should see notification of that coming soon. Again, that'll be free to download. Take a look at it, see how it might be applicable to your firm. All right, so today, all the time I have clients, call and say, hey, we need to get going. We need to get started on some kind of cybersecurity compliance program. And so today I want to walk you through what I do when I start that engagement. Today I'm going to walk through as if you have nothing. There's no documentation. We have no technical operations in place. And, I think sometimes when clients reach out, they're like, oh man, we don't have anything. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, right? This is a blank slate, right? Like we're going to easily walk through that. And the reason I say that is if you're on here and you're in a place where you kind of just aren't comfortable with your cybersecurity compliance program, maybe you're a new CCO that took over and you really don't have a lot of insight, sometimes it makes sense just to scrap everything, take an assessment of what we really need, and then rebuild up from that. And so that's sort of the approach I'm going to talk about today. I break up two things when I'm thinking about this. One's the operational framework, and the other one's the compliance framework. And these are the two frameworks that we're trying to put together to build this program. Okay. For the operational framework, we have to think about it as what are we really trying to protect? Okay. All of us are trying to protect data. Okay. For those that have custody, that elect that they have custody on their Form ADV, we're also protecting assets. And that's not to say that we don't have, phishing attempts against RIAs without custody, that, they don't get a successful wire out and that sort of thing, but we do see a lot more asset losses in firms that have custody. So we have to take these two things, data and assets, and we have to understand how our employees are going to interact with those two things. How are they handling our clients' data, and how are they handling assets, whether it's cashiering, third-party transfers, whatever that may be. And they're using these data points across many different fronts, right? Like we have this data at the office. It's going to be at the custodians and the brokers, the prime brokers that we have. It's going to be with the MSPs that we use, the managed service providers. These are companies that come in and a lot of times set up the tech infrastructure. And especially now, like we have work from home employees, which introduces a whole nother level of complexity to building this operational framework. So that's one of the key aspects that we try to build into this and understanding what fits best for the firm. The other is the compliance framework. So I've had a lot of webinars on 20649. I won't dive in too much into this, but prior to 20649, we basically had the SEC coming out with notifications from OC or these other kind of divisions and saying, hey, we did 20 audits. Here's kind of the best practices that we saw. We recommend that you do these. And if you have any questions, refer to NIST. They'll have the answers for you. It was basically the SEC's stance. Well, that changed spring of 2023. We saw the introduction of 20649, which the total regulation, I think, is a little over 270 pages, but lucky for you, the SEC put out this little 2-pager that you see up on the screen here. So that's definitely worth checking out. So 20649 is not a final rule yet. I'm not sure that we have any direct insight on when it will be a final rule, but it is expected to be coming down the pipeline. So everything I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to reference 20649 because this is the highest standard that an RIA can follow right now. If we're following this standard, we should be good with anything, that kind of comes down the pipeline from the SEC. So that's the viewpoint we start with. A few things 20649 is going to require, and I'll cover each one of these in detail today. Risk and threat assessments, right? So if you look at that security and compliance document I talked about earlier, all the time we see the SEC request a written risk and threat assessment. And a lot of people are like, I don't even know what that is. So we'll talk about that. Individual employee security and user access rights, okay? You cannot have a system today that has personally identifiable information on it and does not have two-factor authentication. Hard stop. There is no way we can write a compliance program without having two-factor authentication on any program that has sensitive data. So we need to document that. We also need to document the user access rights. For smaller firms, this isn't that big of a deal. Even though, if we have 3 or 4 people, we still need to document it, but we all know the reality. Everyone's touching everything, but we just need to document it, and that's okay. For larger firms, traders shouldn't have access to accounting, and accounting shouldn't have access to trading, and trading shouldn't have access to the CRM. So we need to demonstrate this, that we've actually thought about how we're going to protect our data from inside threats. Information protection protocols and procedures, that's going to be our policies and procedures manual where we write everything out. We'll definitely cover that in detail today. And then we're going to talk about how we do threat vulnerability management, right? So how do we actually connect to our infrastructure and test it and know where our vulnerabilities are and come up with a list of how to fix them and make them strong? Response and recovery, right? So not only is this in 20649, but elsewhere, maybe it's Reg SP and SID and several others, 20647. But we talk about that we have to have a response plan, a business continuity plan. So we also have to have that for cyber, and whether you want to include that in your firm's business continuity plan as like an addendum, or you want to have a totally separate thing, that's totally up to you, but we definitely have to have some kind of response and recovery game plan. And then we're going to talk about employee security training. So 100% your biggest threat is your employees. They're going to click on links. They are going to visit websites they shouldn't. They're going to open client data on insecure laptops at their house, right? So we really need to train them on these things. And those are definitely records the SEC is going to ask for. So let's start with the policies and procedures manual, okay? When I sit down with a firm and, I'm starting to build out this program for them, this is literally, just with this, I will sit down and start with this and say, here are the different aspects we're going to cover, okay? Some of them are going to be dynamic reports. Most of it's going to be static, okay? So our definitions, our summary of program, our cybersecurity manager identification, we definitely have to have that. We have to pinpoint, someone, right? Someone has to be in charge of this program. So we have to name them in this document. Our threat assessments, okay? So where you see these exhibits, these are going to be what I call dynamic documents. These are going to be documents that we're going to talk about in a little bit that are in constant flow. So it's our scans, it's our network audits, all the stuff that we're running to check our network. These are going to be our exhibits. And then each section is going to be a static document that helps describe how we operate that system, okay? So I start with this. User access rights and controls, one thing I'll point out is employee technology usage agreements, okay? We have to have a policies and procedures manual, and we also have to have an employee technology usage agreement. This can literally be just a one-pager that says, hey, you're not going to connect at Starbucks. You're not going to connect to the Hilton, bar Wi-Fi. Whatever that threat situation looks like for you, and if your employees travel, they work from home, we have to have this physical document signed once a year, generally done with your annual compliance audit. That's an employee technology usage agreement. If you don't have one and need help with some wording for that, just ping me in an email. I can definitely send you some language that you can use. And also in this document, again, just the user access rights and controls, we'll go through and administer that. Defense of the firm's networks, this is really, I start with this. I start with what you see on screen, but as I start to work through it, and talking to my clients and learning about their systems, this can kind of quickly add on, right? So if we have, more cloud services, or if we're doing something strange, or if we have an MSP or something that we're using, this is usually the section that I will expand out. But to start with, when I start with the framework right here that you see on the screen, it becomes very easy to go through and do the testing, okay, which we'll talk about here in a minute, do the testing, and then circle back to this framework and start to fill in the pieces. And, I've literally done this across hundreds of firms, and it works really well. It's just a clear guide to understand, okay, what does our full infrastructure look like, and how are we going to build a protection plan around it? Okay, so that was the compliance framework. Let's talk about the operational framework and what we're trying to build. Okay, so this is a graphic I use when we're talking about penetration tests. When we're doing a penetration test on a firm, this is a graphic I use, but in a lot of ways, it still works for what we're talking about, okay? What you see labeled here is intranet. Let's think of that as our office, our physical office. And inside that office, maybe we have application servers, maybe we have print servers and printers, maybe we have backup file storage. We probably have employee workstations, we probably have employees on telephones. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that we are testing each and every one of these systems. Okay, so if I have, John Smith on a Windows workstation, I want to test it and make sure that it's patched, it's updated, It's got no malware. And I want to do the same with everything that's connected within this network, including the network switches, the routers, the firewalls, everything that's used to connect that office to the internet, we need to test. Okay, so we're connecting to it, we're testing it, we're checking it against known good configurations, right, to make sure it's set up. And same thing with cloud services, which we'll talk about, right? You can't just put your data in the cloud and think it's safe there. It actually makes it more difficult from a compliance standpoint, because now we have to add an additional layer of testing to any cloud infrastructure we have, Salesforce, Azure, AWS, any of this, we also have to go and check the configuration and make sure that everything's set up correctly. And I'll show you some examples of that in a little bit. Remote offices, right? If we have employees working from home, I don't want my traders working from home next to their teenage child who's running, some kind of Minecraft gaming server or, something of that nature, right? Like, we definitely want to make sure we have our remote offices secure. Whether that's through VPN or whatever that case may be, we have to build an operational framework that shows, hey, we know where all of these systems are, we test them regularly, and here are the results of those tests, and here is how we're going through and fixing it and constantly upgrading to make sure that the latest cyber threats don't affect us. So let's talk about the toolbox, and this is where it gets painful, and it's painful for me too. I pay full retail price for these, and if you've seen my webinars before, this is where I always ask people who maybe have a better way to do this or are doing similar operations in their firm to reach out so we can save some money. Nessus is my go-to product. Okay, Nessus is a vulnerability scanner, and again, we'll look at examples of all this in a minute, but it's a vulnerability scanner that we can deploy, and very rarely do I come across a firm where I can't deploy this one piece of software and tag everything that I need in terms of vulnerability scanning, network mapping, testing cloud infrastructure, looking for patched, updated systems, confirming I don't have any remote desktop connections open. Nessus is always my go-to. It's expensive, okay? It's $5,000 a year because it's really good and it is the industry standard. I've tried lesser options. There's one called Rapid7, a little bit different deployment, slightly more expensive depending on how many number of IPs you're deploying it on. I deploy across thousands of IPs, which puts it out of my price range, and so Nessus is always the one to go to, but even Rapid7 at its bottom pricing is going to be very similar here. These are yearly prices, and you get support and everything like that with it. But we'll talk about Nessus. That's a big tool. I use Maltego. Okay, if you've seen in the past, I was a big fan of Maltego. About a year ago, they were bought by private equity, and it's been downhill since then. It used to be $1,000 a year. It instantly jumped to $5,000 a year without any upgrade to the system. Further, I had some billing errors with them that ended up having to go to credit card dispute. The credit card dispute found in my favor and refunded my money. They basically charged me after I canceled my subscription. So I no longer have the premium Maltego subscription, and that's fine. I like Maltego because they have a community version, and Maltego helps me to organize a ton of information, which you'll see in a minute, and the community version is free. And so I use the community version now, and the value in Maltego used to be that it took a lot of operations that we use. Right now, I use them in Python to do our threat intelligence work. And so Maltego used to provide a great little platform to automate all of that, and it was worth it for $1,000 a year. For $5,000 a year, it's much easier to use free Python and use a little bit of Python language. And even if you're terrified of Python, this is one of those things you can hire someone very inexpensively to come write a program for you, and it doesn't have to change that much. So My option was to take Python and use the free version of Maltego, and I get the same results. You basically just lose the automation. So I no longer recommend the subscription version of Maltego. To me, the free version is everything that we need. So just kind of a heads up there. Another program I use is called ZenMap. ZenMap is awesome. It's 100% free. If you click on the website, it looks a little sketchy. I don't know that the website's been updated since 1995, but if you click the download button, I can assure you it works, and you can do your own research there. This is a kind of an industry-leading tool, and it is super powerful in helping us understand and map the network and know what's on there. So that's the toolbox. Again, it's expensive, but these are, unfortunately, the best tools that we need to get done what the SEC wants us to do. So let's talk about step one. Okay, we know what we're doing. We have an operational framework. We have a compliance framework. We've got our policies and procedures manual in place. But let's pretend we're a brand new CCO, or we're a brand new, COO, whoever's in charge of cybersecurity, and we now have this program that we have no idea where everything is, right? Documentation was poor before. So let's do some planning. Let's understand everything that's on our network, and let's understand everywhere that data flows, okay? So this colorblind test looking map that you see up on the screen here is a Maltego graph. And what we're doing here, we'll zoom into more detail in these dots in a second. Each one of these dots represents a piece of information, whether it's a vulnerability about a particular system or something that's running on the system. But we can use ZenMap or we can use Nessus to go and map our network. And then we take those maps and import them into Maltego. And Maltego produces our compliance documentation. That's the general workflow here. So we start with planning. This is a real map that I created for a three-man shop. One office with three individuals in it. Each one of the dots above represents a particular item on the network, like a printer, a computer, a router, something of that nature. And then down below, we start to see the different services that are running on them. Are they patched? Are they updated? So again, we'll dive into more detail into this map in a second. Let's talk about threat intelligence work. I think this is one of the biggest mysteries that comes up to everyone, and everyone's kind of like, what are you doing? Right? Like, what is threat intelligence work? What does the SEC want to see? Okay, so I would like to, I like to try to break everything down to the real world. Okay, let's pretend I'm a street criminal and I want to rob you. Okay, I want to steal, something from your pocket, a watch, money, whatever it may be in your pocket. And I have two options. I can walk up to you. I can put a pistol in your face. It can get very aggressive. Things can go really wrong. I can end up in a lot of trouble as a criminal, right? Like, I don't really want to hurt this guy. I just want to get the money and get out. And things can go really bad if I produce a weapon in this, okay? My fingerprints are all over the scene. He sees me. There's witnesses. It's a commotion. Nobody wants that, okay? What if, on the other hand, I decided that I wanted to be a pickpocket? And I walked by and I pulled the money out. No one knew a crime happened. There's no witnesses. I walk on my merry way and no one is the wiser. I have the money. I'm on no one's radar. The police aren't looking for me, okay? Hackers have the same mindset. If they can steal your information without having to touch any of your systems, that's how they're going to do it, because they are not leaving a fingerprint on your system. They are taking advantage of a vulnerability that you've created. And that's what threat intelligence work is about. So what am I looking for when I'm doing threat intelligence work? I'm looking for exposed infrastructure, subdomains, right? Did your website developer that you hired, did he create a subdomain so that he could test your network? And he never told you about it, but it's out there. Those are the things I'm gonna look for. I also look for domain spoofing. Okay, so if I have ABC Wealth Advisors, I'm making that up. I hope I don't have an ABC Wealth Advisors on here. But if I have an abcwealthadvisors.com on here, I want to know if abcwealthadvisors.net was recently registered. And if so, did they get email records? Did they build a website? Or was this domain just registered to try to trick my clients and be an attack surface on me, right? So I want to know about what domains, what IPs, what kind of infrastructure is showing up under my name that I might not know about. DNS record misconfigurations. This is a huge one. Okay, so if I'm sitting at my desk and I don't know who you are, if I don't know ABC Wealth Advisors and I type that into my browser has no idea what IP address to visit to give me that website. So it references DNS records, domain name service records. And domain name service records tell my browser where to go to visit your website. And these DNS records direct everything, especially emails. Okay, so in a similar fashion, if I send an email, it's going to look up DNS and figure out what to send it. DMARC records. Everyone on this webinar that's a client of mine, we've had a conversation about DMARC records, right? This is an extremely important record to make sure that people cannot spoof your domain and spoof your email address. And I'm going to take a wild guess that 70% of you don't have your DMARC records set up on your DNS. If you don't, it's super easy to check. Just go to Google, type in DMARC record checker. There's a ton of different websites you can go, click it, and figure out if you have DMARC records. But that is a huge one. And this is the type of threat intelligence work I'm looking for, because a hacker would see that and go, great, I can spoof this guy's email, right? So if I can figure out his clients, I can easily send his clients an email looking like I'm him. So these are the type of things that I'm looking for. It goes on and on. You know, I'm looking for breach data. You know, pretty much all your employees have a LinkedIn account. They probably have an Adobe account. Maybe some of them drive Audis, right? There have been so many breaches. Maybe they ordered from Drizzly to get alcohol during during COVID, and now their driver's license is out there, right? So if I can correlate someone's driver's license on the dark web and I've got their password and I know they're at a trader at a firm, maybe I have good access, you know, getting into that account. So I'm looking for breach data, things that have been out there. Just a lot of different stuff goes into threat intelligence work. And this is one of those that really depends on the firm, what I'm looking for. You know, if you have Google Workstation, that's a nightmare, right? Because your employees are always going to accidentally share their calendars. And now everyone can see, you know, who you're meeting with, what clients meetings are going on. And it happens because they think they're securely sharing their calendar with a CRM or their at-home email address, whereas it's really just printing it out to the world. So this is a big one. Jumping back to the toolbox, this is where I use a lot of Python. You know, again, if you want to spend $5,000 for Maltego, it can automate a lot of that threat intelligence work, or you can do it for free in Python and then just import it into the free Maltego. So this is kind of a quick example of a zoom in on that Maltego that I showed that I would use to mine my OSINT data. And OSINT is open source intelligence, if I didn't mention that earlier. But we're looking for OSINT data when we do our threat intelligence work. So here, for instance, I took johndoe@gmail.com. Okay, so that email address at the top has been randomized. Down below it, I don't know if these are interconnected globes or what these icons are, but each one of these is going to be a different breach that happened. Okay, so here's the Adobe bonobos. Guys, if you wear the bonobos pants, you're probably in this. Here's Audi. Apollo was a marketing firm. So every breach here you see is a real breach that was from a real client of mine. Just again, the email at the top has been changed. And then down below that, I list all the different information I was able to collect about this individual from that breach. So I've got his usernames, his passwords, his IP addresses, partial credit card data, his historical passwords, password hints, dates of birth. So what you start to do, okay, this is just a quick kind of zoom in. When I do this for a large firm, these go into the 5,000s and 6,000s, literally, of how many breaches we can find, and we start to get a lot of data. So when I can get historical passwords, when I can get password hints, and I can get current passwords, it's really easy for me to figure out your employees' password patterns. Do they do password 123? Then they change it to password 123 exclamation point. Then back to password 123. We can start to picture exactly what kind of security this individual is running. So this data, when a hacker is viewing it, you know, this is going to be my attack map. And again, I'm gathering all this without ever putting a single fingerprint on any infrastructure that you own. So if there's a cyber attack, my fingerprint's nowhere on it, and I've already gathered a ton of information. So again, this is what we're really looking for with the threat intelligence work, okay? My clients hear me talk about threat intelligence work, and I call that our unprivileged audit, okay? I'm looking for information that you did not give me access to, okay? On the other side of that, we do what we call a privileged audit, okay? So I use Nessus for that. And when we deploy Nessus, of course, my clients are helping me get it set up, or when they're deploying it themselves, they're getting it set up. But Nessus is infrastructure that helps us do our vulnerability scanning internally. So for instance, I may deploy Nessus in 3 different areas. I may deploy it internally inside my office, and that scan would be scanning all the computers, laptops, printers, anything that's got a Wi-Fi connection in that office would be scanned. And we are scanning it, we're figuring out what systems are there, and then we're comparing it against a database of known vulnerabilities so that we quickly get a report and know exactly what we have to update. I would also deploy this externally. So I would have it looking at my website, my email servers. You can see I don't have it in the version of Nessus that I purchased, but there is an upgrade where you can do mobile device management. So if I have employees with cell phones, maybe I'm doing an audit externally on those cell phones to make sure they're patched and updated. If I have the third location I may deploy it would be at your cloud level. So if you're using AWS, if you're using Azure, Salesforce, any of these popular cloud infrastructures, what we want to do is connect it to Nessus and make sure that everything is as secure as it can be in that cloud infrastructure, and we're not leaking data anywhere. So this graph is what an internal scan would look like. So, from the dashboard we were just looking at, I would set up my internal scan, I would schedule it, it would know the IP addresses to go, and then we would have a screen that looks like this, and the color codes are exactly what they look like. 21 critical vulnerabilities on this one system. We have 37 high vulnerabilities and 78 medium level vulnerabilities. This is pretty typical. Okay, I didn't cherry pick this example. Most firms, when you deploy Nessus, this is what you're going to see, because you have, especially if you have a workforce of 20, 25 people, you're going to see there are so many outdated machines. You have so many employees who never update their machines, and maybe you don't have that in place to go and check. Nessus is going to do that. This is just a screenshot, but if it was real at the top, you could click on vulnerabilities here, and it would rearrange this to tell you, okay, we have one vulnerability called, ABC, and here are the 5 different systems that are affected by that. So same data, just a different way to list it and look at it. And then there's a remediations tab. So, if we really are trying to figure out what we need to do, Nessus is awesome because it will literally give you a step-by-step guide on how to fix things, right? So you identify them and you come up with a work plan to go through and fix these. Here's another quick example of what a cloud scan would look like. And I think a lot of people are kind of like confused what you would look like, what you would look for, for a cloud scan. So, looking at the top one here where it failed, basically what we're doing is we're taking a known security file, and I take one produced by the CIS. I think it's Center for Information Security. I could have that wrong. Just a bunch of geeks that put together these benchmarks that tell us how to securely deploy any systems, okay? So you can go, you take it, you use Nessus to compare it, and like here at the top, we can see that someone is not using multi-factor authentication, okay? So we have someone accessing our cloud system without having multi-level authentication. Let's back up a little bit and understand why that's a problem. If I've done my threat intelligence work, I know you have cloud systems. If I've really done my threat intelligence work and I've gone through and I've pulled breach data, I'm going to know that John Smith has 10 different breaches he's been involved in, and in every breach he used password 123 as his password. Guess what his cloud password is? It's going to be that easy. Without two-factor authentication, it is so simple to get access to this and to find misconfigurations where maybe people have gone on the cheap and deployed AWS, right? So these are all the things that we want to look for. And again, with this, whether we're the developer or not, Nessus allows me to print a PDF report and go to my MSP or go to my developer and basically be like, what the heck, man? Why is this coming up? Why is there so much red on this report? That becomes a fun time when you start to see these guys scramble and explain why, why things are set up like they are. One of the biggest things I see with managed service providers is the way they access the network. If you are a managed service provider, your day-to-day looks like you're supporting 20 different individuals. You are going to have some way to have quick access to those networks, to jump in and out, right? And a lot of times they leave that open. So that's what we want to know. Okay, again, let's jump back to Maltego real quick. And the reason I like Maltego, even though there was the problem with the team and with the paid version, is just because it allows such an easy system to build graphical documentation about our cyber program and produce that written documentation PDF. So, if the SEC is sitting down, we can literally pull this stuff up and say, hey, look, walk through our network with us, okay? And so after I've done my Nessus scans, I'm going to know where my vulnerabilities are, and I'm going to need to come up with a game plan to show the SEC, hey, look, we're on top of them. We're going to fix this stuff, okay? So I take the Nessus scan and then I import it into Maltego and I map it out like this. And here's an example of the Dunder Mifflin office in Scranton. You can see we just took two different machines. We have Pam's machine, which is pam@dundermifflin.local. And we have the scanner, which is located right next to Pam, scanner.dundermifflin.local. Each one of these little call outs that you see under these systems. So first, this is going to be the IP address where they're located on the network. And then underneath is going to be what services are running. What SSL certificates does it have? What is the MAC address of this system? What ports, what services are open? I map everything. If I have a vulnerability that I know needs to be addressed, it looks like this, okay? And so, if I'm working with a team to get things resolved, we can all open Maltego, we can all click on these and work on them together and figure out what we need to plan. So again, that's just why I like Maltego. It really helps us understand the infrastructure and what needs to be scanned there. This is going to be another example of it, right? So if you took an RIA called velaford.com, they may have a section that is secure.velaford.com. This may be a client portal, okay, in this example. In that situation, we want to know everything about that client portal. What systems are running on it? Is it Linux? Is it Windows? What databases are there? All of this stuff we need to be aware of. And you may be wondering why. Why do we need to be aware of that? Well, if you remember, this was the most recent example I can remember, the log4j vulnerability, the JavaScript vulnerability. I think that hit kind of mainstream news. So even if you aren't a super nerd or geek like me and my guys, you still maybe caught wind of that. Okay, so if you have a graph like this, it's so easy to jump in and say, hey, do we have this system running anywhere, right? Like I can just open up my PDF that has all of my information. I can click Control F, find, search the system, and see quickly, do we have any systems that are affected by these vulnerabilities? Again, if you have Nessus running, it should catch that, but it's a great way just to go through and look and understand literally every grain that is on the network. This is another version of Maltego. So if you click on one of those dots, it'll take you to a screen that looks like this where you can store information. So I use Maltego to store and manage employee user access rights. Okay, so here you can see we have the RIA Velaford. They run velaford.com, and they have the secure velaford.com client portal. Okay. Velaford also has employee John Doe. This is John's email. This is his cell phone. And here is the access that he has to secure Velaford. And if we click on him, we can see when he was hired, what his role is, what user access rights does he have. So he's an admin, so he has access to the secure. Or maybe he could be let's say a trader, and he doesn't have access to the client portal, but maybe he has access to Schwab that we have listed over here. This is just a great graphical way for us to map our employees, where their user access rights are, and what systems they may be using. And you can go and add all kinds of things to this, right? So maybe we issue John a Ubico key, a two-factor key. We can go and keep track of that here. It's really customizable, so you can go in and it's literally just drag and drop to build this kind of information for your firm. Again, using Multigo, we get the graphical version like this, and there's also a version to quickly print it out to a PDF if we need to. Response and recovery game plan. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it looks so different from for every client. If all your systems are in the cloud, that's a whole different scenario. If you have custody, that's a whole different scenario. If you have work from home, that's a whole different scenario. But I think the framework is pretty much the same, right? Prepare. Know where your gaps are, know your infrastructure, which if you followed along so far, we've definitely done that. We know everything about our network. We know every system that's running on it, every employee, everything, okay? So triage it. Know what data is at risk, right? Did we take client data and put it on Dropbox? That's at risk. Did we take client data and encrypt it and put it on a local internal network access storage drive? Maybe that's not at risk, right? Each little thing that you do, you have to stop and think. And this is really one of those situations where, it's just that terrible phrase, it depends, okay? What are we trying to protect? Who's the likely coming after you, right? If you're one of these RIAs that's managing in Bitcoin, I can tell you, for me as a consultant, it's a hard stop. I won't work with RIAs that are dealing with Bitcoins, because you are going to be a major, major, major target. And that's nothing that I want to put my firm's name on, right? So if you are dealing with Bitcoin, that scope of attack is huge for you, very large. And if it's successful, you have nation states coming after you. And if they're successful, there's literally nothing you can do about it. So know what that looks like for you. I understand that Bitcoin can be this lucrative thing. It can also be this extreme compliance and financial asset nightmare. Contain. Okay, so when we know there's some kind of situation, kind of like the cover page here, start ripping wires. Unplug from the network. Stop what you're doing. If you have traders that absolutely have to be connected to the network, they're getting on hard lines and calling the trade desk. But we are shutting down all networks, and we're going to triage and figure out exactly what went wrong. And most of the time, that's going to involve blocking what we call C2 domains. C2 is command and control. These are the domains that hackers will use to attack you. Again, whether they've tried to use a doppelganger or they've just set up some random mass attack domain, we need to go in and block. We need to find out what accounts they've gotten into, revoke those privileges, and sometimes it becomes a full slash and burn, okay? There's times when you have to, after an attack, where you have to stop and look at your infrastructure and say, hey, does it make sense to spend $30,000 on forensic analysis, or should we throw every one of this pieces of equipment away and start brand new? That's literally a question that you'll have to ask, because sometimes that is the easiest. And then remediate, right? Remove the attacker, get those security patches in place, re-image the affected networks, get everyone back and running. Again, going to be very different from each and every firm, but this is, this is the framework that we need to be looking at. Training, okay? Again, your employees are going to be the biggest risk that you have. They're going to let people in, whether through extortion. Okay, so going back to that breach data, one of the things that we saw was a website called Ashley Madison. And Ashley Madison, if you're not familiar, was a website that promoted adultery. So by design, everyone that was involved in this breach was more than likely involved in some kind of adultery. And oftentimes people who were involved in this breach used their work email addresses that they thought their spouse wouldn't have as much access to register for these services. So if I'm a hacker, I'm going through the Ashley Madison breach domain, I find someone who registered with the word financial or wealth in their email address, and now they're on my short list. And now I found that they had a spouse that I easily located through Facebook. And now you can go and blackmail them to basically say, hey, John, I know you're on Ashley Madison. Does your wife know that? If not, click here. That's all I'm asking, and I'll go away, right? And they let people into your network. So we train on those type of situations. We have to know that, look, phishing isn't just going to come from some, overthrown Nigerian prince who needs help getting his 5 million, and he's going to pay you $1 million for helping him. That's so stereotypical that like everyone's trained for it. And so what we really want to train for is knowing what are they going to do when they come after your employees. They're not, especially when we talk about spear phishing attacks, they're going to come at them directly. So we have a program called Fieldcraft that we use to do this training. It's super awesome. Takes about 10 minutes to set up. It's a month-to-month $5 per user fee to have access to it, month-to-month pricing on that. But if you have less than 10 employees, I actually have a free version. It's a limited, but it's a free version if you're a firm with less than 10 employees. So if you don't have any training, you're a small firm, I know that the traditional, the know befores, these are insanely expensive and put it out of the reach, but training is extremely important. So if you're a small shop and you're not doing anything, just shoot me a quick email and I'll get you set up with some free training so that you guys can go through. We do it so it's customized. You can literally choose the topics that are appropriate from your firm. Do you use Zoom? Do you have people working from home? Or are there VPNs? It's got a quick portal to quickly produce those compliance documents we need. And all the videos, there's a little over 90 training videos on different topics. Each one has live actors with a slight bit of humor. There's none of the cartoon stuff. And takes about 3 or 4 minutes to get through. So a full training program, for a firm that doesn't have anything in place, a good training program is probably going to be an hour to an hour and a half of employee training spread out over a year. Is typically what I like to suggest that we have, making sure we're hitting a number of topics, social awareness, privacy, mobile, internet, all these topics. Again, if you don't have anything, you have less than 10 employees, or 10 or fewer employees, I should say, reach out and I'll definitely get you set up with this. Okay, and one of the last things I'll talk about is record keeping, right? Like we should be doing this stuff anyway, but it's just worth noting that 20649 calls us out specifically. For 5 years, we have to keep versions of our policies and procedures manual, our annual review documentation, any documentation related to the audits and the pen tests that we've done, our regulatory filings related to cyber incidents. On our side of it, if there's a lawyer in the audience, I'd love for you to chime in and help me out here. But on the RIA side of it, I'm not exactly sure we have any regulatory filings that are necessary yet. I know on the public traded company side, they have some yet. I don't think that's yet filtered over. That will with 20649. 20649 is going to introduce a new Form ADVC. Okay, the Form ADVC has to be filed anytime there's a cyber incident. What's a cyber incident? Your guess is as best as mine. Maybe we'll get some more insight on that. But we have to file the Form ADVC anytime there's a cyber incident. We also have to add language to our Part ADV2A, our written brochure to clients. We'll now have to have an overview of our cyber program, okay? So these are going to be some of the regulatory filings that we'll have to keep up with when 20649 comes in. Our written risk and threat assessment, most of my clients do those once a year. Some of them do them ongoing. I always suggest once a year at a minimum, but if you have any kind of major infrastructure change, if you're jumping from a Google workspaces to Office 365 or, into some kind of some kind of cloud system, it's definitely worth going through and doing a modern updated risk and threat assessment. Cyber insurance policies. I've had whole webinars on cyber insurance policies. I think they're absolutely worthless. Okay, if you're doing all the work and protecting your network, you don't need cyber insurance. And there are the policies and the underwriting. Again, we've broken into the underwriting, these actual things of how they're looking in, and covered them in another webinar that's on YouTube if you want to check it out. But these are disastrous policies, and you should never rely on them to actually pay anything. At best, they're going to offer your clients some like a yearly credit monitoring service. It costs them like $1 per client. Anyway, it's absolutely worthless. Okay, that's my operations hat. Now let me switch and put my compliance hat on. I would never want to sit through an examination where I was trying to explain to the examiner why I didn't have cyber insurance. That conversation's not going to go well. So you need a cyber insurance policy. Don't overthink it, okay? Get something cheap, get something that gives you papers. I have a client that I do remote CISO work for, basically just kind of monitoring their systems on the outside. They use Bitdefender's Gravity Zone for a lot of their infrastructure. And Bitdefender, I don't know if this is recent, but it's definitely a cool feature, but they offer free cyber insurance if you use their program. And that's plenty. We don't need anything other than that, right? We just need some kind of policy on paper. Again, any lawyers out there that disagree with me, please reach out. I'm always looking for feedback on what we're doing for our clients. But that's my operations hat. It's worthless. The compliance hat, you got to get one, because any regulatory examination is not going to go well if you try to convince the examiner why you don't think you need a cyber insurance policy. Okay. Board approval on all cyber documents. We talked about the policies and procedures manual. We have to have, do we call him a scapegoat? I don't know. Let's not call him a scapegoat. Let's call him a cyber operations manager. We got to pinpoint someone is going to be in charge of this stuff. And this person is in charge of not only making sure that the operations are in place, that the compliance is being followed, but also getting board approval on everything. Okay, so this cyber manager is also going to be the middleman between the executives and the documentation. I think it would be very risky for any executives to sit through an examination and not be fully versed on the cyber program. Maybe not at a technical level, but at least at enough level where you can talk about what's in place and what's going on, or outsourcing that to someone, who can sit in for you and does this type of work to help walk them through that. All right, that's it. Did we finish in under an hour? We did. All right, I was kind of questioning if we'd get through that. Again, I just wanted to give you guys a broad overview of what it looks like when I sit down with a new client and we start to work through these systems, okay? 20649 is going to be challenging. It is going to be expensive. If you go and read the comment period on this regulation, everyone agrees. Not only is it expensive, not only is it an operational nightmare, it is a security nightmare, okay? Because now we're going to have everything about our program documented in the Form ADBC and the Part 2A. So, circle back to that threat intelligence work that we were talking about earlier. For a hacker, all of these documents that you're now required to file that list out what you're doing cybersecurity wise, they're now going to have that information. So they're going to know what systems you have in place and know how to get around those systems. So it's an absolute nightmare. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be challenging. Again, you can't read between the lines. I'm not a fan of it. I do think we need overall regulation change, but I don't think 20649 was designed by people who really understand the realities of threats and the operations that the vast majority of the RIAs face. If you're Goldman, if you have $100 billion under management, no one really cares, right? You're just going to go and put these systems in place and do what you're told. And that's not a problem. But I kind of want to speak to the others where they do have to think about what's in place. They do have to think about the cost to go and get this in place, and maybe they don't have the technical knowledge and need help understanding, what the SEC is saying, and then breaking that down into a technical level. So that's always my goal. If you're interested in seeing any other videos, I'm going to post a recording of this on my YouTube channel, and also the recordings of past where we walk through things like cyber insurance, how to hack a firm, right? We'll actually walk through hacks and show you how you go through and break through a firm's firewall. Again, hopefully those are helpful for you. If I can be of any assistance, please feel free to reach out. I would definitely love to chat with you about this, and answer any questions you may have. Okay, a couple questions here. One question is, have I heard of Arctic Wolf? I have not. If you want to type kind of a quick follow-up there and just give me a quick overview of what that is, I'm certainly happy to chime in the best I can, but I'm not familiar with that particular program. Another question is, will you share the presentation? Yes, definitely. It will be sent around if you're in this webinar. It will be sent around in the email afterwards. Usually comes out about 24 hours. I'll hope to get that out before the weekend. There's just a little bit of processing of the video and getting it put up into the different channels. It takes a little bit of time, but roughly 24 hours before the weekend, you should have a copy of the presentation in your email there as well. And that's it, guys. No other questions there. If there's anything you'd like to talk about, again, please feel free to reach out. Always love to chat. I'm not a lawyer. I don't charge by the hour if you want to call and discuss this. But I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, and certainly appreciate you joining me on here and listening to what we have to say. It really means a lot, and thankful that you're here.